she'll step in and tell us what to do. I'm also going to let her tell us what she wants us to do to indicate if we want to talk. I think most of you, especially if you can see the screen, if you're not on your phone, you can kind of tell if somebody unmutes and, usually indicates that they want to speak. But we'll let her kind of handle that. So Sky, do you want to tell us that?
Yeah, normally there's a little hand raise icon, which is great, except for we have a lot of people who are on phones. So as Betty said, just pay attention to who starts to talk. If you have a question and you can't get in, if you want to indicate in the chat, I can go ahead and be like, hey, everyone be quiet and listen to this person's question. But most of you can see who else trying to talk.
Okay, great. Well, I thought we'd start. I will give you a little summary and bring you up to date on where we are on all this. After that, then I'll open it up to the other Spark committee members for their comments. And then I really would like this to just be kind of a discussion, brainstorming type meeting from there on. So let me start by giving you a little summary. The Federal CARES Act allocated money to the Coronavirus Relief Fund, the CRF, and that was sent to the states. In our state, the governor created the Governor's Spark Task Force. Spark stands for Strengthening People and Revitalizing Kansas. That task force allocated to the counties this money, and it was mostly based on population. Shawnee County was allocated $36,763,813. The state also stipulated that the counties must share it with other taxing authorities. That would include cities, school districts, could be townships, anything like that. And then it could also go to nonprofits and businesses, but the primary emphasis was on the other taxing authorities. There's kind of two pieces. There's the reimbursement of costs that beginning on March 1st, and then there's the future costs that are anything that's paid through December 30. And what our committee has been looking at and kind of going along with the governor's guidance is that we're looking primarily at the other taxing authorities to share the money with them. And then only if there's money left would we go to the nonprofits and the businesses. So that includes our own county expenses. And that's what I want to talk to you about. There's kind of two pieces, as I said, reimbursements for costs that we've already paid for. That's a little bit easier. That's the easier part of the two. As you know, we set up a job ledger for all of those costs that were coronavirus related. Hopefully you've been using all those. If you know of any costs that were not coded to that, please let Audit Finance know. If you paid something out of a job ledger so you couldn't also put it to the coronavirus job ledger, then also let Audit Finance know that too, so we know those are additional costs that we'll need to pick up. I know, like Larry, you paid some of your plexiglass out of a job ledger, so that one we know about, but anything like that, let Audit Finance know. There's personnel costs that can be reimbursed. Now, HR will have to help us with that. There are specific rules on that. And even the state has gotten some guidance from the federal, but the state still has a lot of questions too. And they have not been able to get a lot of answers. They're still working on that and waiting for some of that. There's, some of these costs that are reimbursement are, they're obvious. They're the PPE, the cleaning supplies, the, computers for people at home. But really, we need to analyze any cost that was caused by COVID-19. That's kind of that's our starting point. And we analyze any costs that were caused by that. and then we would go through the guidance and see if they were really eligible costs. And we have some federal guidance that I can send out to you that might be helpful in some ways. The biggest part that I want us to start thinking about, and the biggest reason for this meeting, are the future costs. That's what we really need to start thinking about. We have got to plan for all these future costs. All of the future costs, the counties and all of the other subrecipients must be submitted, our plan for those must be submitted to the state by August 15th. So that means our Spark committee, that our county Spark committee that was created by the commission, will have to review all those requests and make recommendations to the commission on how to allocate this $36 million. The BCC will ultimately make the decision on how to allocate it, but it's got to be compiled. The information has got to be there, so they can make that. So what I'm telling you is these department plans of what you think you may want to look at as costs probably will have to go to this Spark committee. We'll probably have to have them sometime mid-July just to have time to make it through this process. So we're on a really short time frame, and that's what the reason for the Zoom meeting, because we just didn't feel like the Spark committee just didn't feel like we could put it off any longer. We had to at least tell you what we know. There's a lot of information we don't have from the state yet, but we can't wait for them. We've got to get you information so you can start thinking. And one of the things, especially with these future costs, we need to think of any cost that could be caused by or can improve our COVID-19 response. And I think that last part is something we really need to think about. What can improve our COVID-19 response? All of these have to be paid by December 30. So that's another thing that we've got to really keep in mind. It has to, as I read the federal guidance, it can't just be encumbered, it has to be paid. That's how I'm reading it right now. Now, the state is asking for guidance on that, but the federal guidance that I've read so far seems like it makes it pretty clear that it has to be paid by December 30th, and you cannot pay ahead. Like, you cannot pay for a 2-year contract ahead. So there's still a lot of questions, but that's kind of what I've read. So there's some definite things that would definitely be eligible, like telework is something that's really mentioned as eligible expenses. You know, that can be computers, phones, MiFi, all of that. Pat was mentioning maybe monitors with cameras and microphones, you know, for all these Zoom meetings we're doing, because most all of ours, I'm using my Surface here for this Zoom meeting because, you know, most of our monitors don't have cameras. Angela mentioned scanning records that then could be accessed from home, from people working from home. So, you know, that's some of the telework thoughts, and there's a lot more that you might think of, but that's, you know, just to kind of get you started. Office changes you might make. I know some of you have already done plexiglass. If there's physical office changes that you might need to make, then I think that's something to consider. Brian, with the jail, I was thinking of equipment for video conferencing with attorneys. Maybe you need to refit a room or rooms for those video conferences, anything like that. The courts, I was thinking of maybe equipment for video conferencing, same kind of thing. Video equipment for courtrooms if more attorneys are, you know, I don't know, but if testimony is being done by Zoom rather than in person. I thought about your jury trials, and if you're going to be looking at offsite areas for that so that you can spread out more, maybe technology, partitions, furniture, anything like that may be helpful for that. And then the rest of you need to think about your own department. You know, those are just the ones off the top of my head I thought of. And I don't even know specifically that all of those would be eligible, but I think they're all worth investigating. the State Office of Recovery has provided us a form. It's a request for guidance interpretation. If you have a cost that you're not sure if it would be eligible or not, they have this form that can be filled out, and then it can be sent to the state, and then they will respond, giving us guidance of whether they feel that that is eligible or not. I would ask that you send those forms, and I'll send those blank forms out to you also. I'd ask you send those forms to Audit Finance, and then we will forward them to the state. So we kind of have one person that's going, sending them all there. Then also the Shawnee County Spark Committee has placed an item on Monday's agenda, recommending a consultant to help us with all this. There's such a short time frame, and we've got so much to get done in that short time frame, that we are recommending this consultant. This consultant is working with many, or I don't know how many, but several Kansas counties. They already have forms and processes and everything set up. They started working with Sedgwick County. Sedgwick County got their money earlier, and so they've got a lot of these things already in place. So we really think they can hit the ground running. So we're recommending that. If they are approved, they part of their plan is to have meetings with departments, and they said they probably would have like groups of like departments, and would have video meetings with them to help them with eligible costs. So anyway, that's kind of what I want us to do. I want us to start thinking about what these eligible costs would be, and especially these future ones. If there's costs that can benefit our COVID response, but that also can help us down the road and help us in the future, then let's really look at these and let's see how we can use this money to the best advantage of the county. You know, there may be some of these, especially technology-based or I don't know, a lot of different things that maybe would help us for telework or for video meetings or something. But that's going to be a long-term benefit to the county. So I really want us to look at this and get all the advantage we can out of this money. So I guess now I would like to open it up to other Spark Committee members for their comments.
Betty, this is Bill. Can elected officials like Cindy Beck and Larry Maw, can they submit their time as well? Do they allow elected officials to be at? Can you reimburse their time?
I'm not certain. I think so, but there again, I think HR is really going to have to get into the personnel costs and the guidance. I think as long as but there again, you have to look at how much time they spent on it. Oh, looks like Nelson has a question. Nelson, are you having trouble?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Too many buttons. Sorry about that. Commissioner and Director Ryder, that question has come up quite often, and right now the guidance they're giving us is that they are using the word substantial. So if you do something for 15 minutes, I think they don't want you to estimate forward. But yeah, anybody that is on salary, the elected officials, anybody that you're paying that would have a quote unquote substantial time to put forward is what they're telling us, sir.
Thank you, Nelson.
Anyone else from the Spark Committee?
I'll say a few things. I think that what each of the department heads needs to be thinking of is really thinking outside the box, because we have a lot of money that we need to divide and allocate between not only the county, but to our taxing authorities as well. But we have a really short amount of time to determine what it is that's going to be used. And if we don't come up with a plan for all of those funds down to the last dollar, it reverts back to the state. And so really think outside of the box about what it is that you could come up with for your direct aid. I mean, I understand that coming up with the reimbursements is probably going to be a lot easier because we've already started a process of how we're documenting that. But come up with things that you can foresee in the future based on what you've experienced the last couple of months that would make things easier to accomplish the jobs. And, you know, that comes down from everything from computer screens and technology. And like Director Greiner had said, looking at jury trials or how we can make it easier to communicate with inmates or our constituents, or, you know, how is it that we can make things easier working from home for the employees? And so just really think about all of the different things that we could use this money for. But we have to not only say, this is what we want to do, we have to have a plan, and we have to have it line itemed. We have to know what it's going to cost. We have to know where we would get, you know, the technology or the supplies from. So you have to start looking, and you have to start looking quickly.
I would just step in on that though. Yes, we have to have a plan and we have to know how much it would cost, but I don't think we have to have specific costs. You have to have a ballpark cost. You have to have a reasonable expectation of a cost. You know, if you don't have to have an actual quote for a cost for this stage. Later you will, but not for this stage, because we've just got to get it moving.
Betty, I have a couple questions. What about something that we run into the problem at the jail is that we can't go through the PO system or anything like that if something is back ordered and we don't get an invoice. So if we're expecting to order something from the jail like PPEs and it gets back ordered, we may not, we could order it now. We can't pay for it until like maybe February. And so, and looking ahead, I didn't know how that, obviously I'm thinking being you're saying it has to be paid. If something's on back order, then that ain't going to help us any.
I think there are other avenues for those types of things, especially to me, the PPE in a lot of cases are going to be our smaller expenses. I think we have other grants and other things like that that we can cover with those. This one, I want everybody, as Joni said, to think outside the box. And these can be big projects as long as we can pay for them by December 30th. They can be, you know, substantial projects.
Well, I do have a substantial project, and that is the putting in the teleconferencing in every module that can be used by the courts or attorneys or anything that can be used to set up maybe 3 different teleconferencing issues that like we're doing now with Zoom court. So we're working with Securus now to give us an idea on something like that, what it would cost. I do know, talking to Pat Oblander, that we thought maybe at the very beginning, we didn't have an idea of cost, but I'll work on that. The other question I have is that we pay Corizon's bills. I mean, we pay them there. So can I use Corizon's bills towards COVID that they're paying and what they expect in this?
That we would have to look at, because anything that is budgeted is not allowable unless this would be over and above what you had budgeted, or even if, you know, if you had an employee budgeted, but then you had to change their work, that might make a difference too. But if it's just paying Corizon's normal fee and we're not paying them any additional, that might not be eligible because of that rule.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't know what their budget is. Like, they're expending a lot more on PPEs, tests, and stuff like that, COVID stuff that is not in their regular budget, but we're paying, they're not charging us extra. They're going through because we don't have off-site inmates. So it's staying within their budget, but it's nothing that has to do, it is COVID related.
But I think it would have to be over what you had budgeted to pay them. Let's see what Nelson has a comment on that. Anyway,
So,
there
well, I mean,
again,
if I send an inmate to the hospital for 2 months on COVID and it stays within the regular budget, I can't get reimbursed for that.
no, I don't think that's it.
Well, that's in
No.
our regular budget.
But I mean, with Corizon, you have a contract.
That's
And if
right.
it's within that regular contract amount, I think that might, I don't know, to me, everything is worth looking at and
I
everything
think
is
I
worth
budget
talking through.
800,000. Yeah, we budget 800,000 for off-site deals. So if a inmate goes over to the hospital for 2 months on a COVID-related issue and God forbid dies, and that ends up being a $500,000 bill, well, that's still within my budget of 800,000.
But to me, that is not a normal medical expense that you would have had before. So I would think that would qualify because it is just COVID related and it would not be considered a normal medical expense that you would have budgeted for.
Yeah, yeah, that's my whole question is something they normally wouldn't have budgeted for related to COVID. That's what I'm trying to ask, is whether it's offsite, whether it's processes in here, they hire somebody else to come in and do an infectious something, whatever, they can stay within their budget, but it has to do with COVID related specific stuff.
There again, I think we're going to have to work with you individually on these.
Okay, because
I think this is something the consultant can help with.
Okay.
Brian, but concerning the physical structure of your jail, did you run into a situation where you had to renovate a certain cell, or maybe more just to accommodate coronavirus inmates or anything like that, or is that a situation where we might have to look at that we might have in the future where we need a cell that has a, what do they call it, a negative air pressure
yeah, we
situation?
have two of those right. We have two of those right now. I suggest that we look at maybe building 2 more, but it would have to do with the layout out of the facility to where the ventilation can go strictly outside. When KDHE came in, they designated 2. I don't know if any more, but yes, we have already done that with 2 in the past. That was done, oh gosh, many years ago. We're one of the few jails that have that. But if we look to that, then I can certainly look at the cost. KDHE would have to come in and help us with that. But I was just looking at anything that's not within our normal budget for Corizon that they have. If it was related, they're keeping a strict tab on all COVID-related expenses. And being I pay their bill, that was my question. But that may be something we have to work individually, like you said, Betty.
Okay, are there any other comments from the Spark Committee? Okay, let's go through then. Let's just start kind of like Brian was doing. Let's just throw out some questions, some brainstorming. Let's just kind of get our brains going on this.
Betty, I think one of the things they mentioned or that we talked about last week also to think about would be items that you were looking at now having to spend next year, but you could move those forward to this year and it's not necessarily listed on a budget anywhere.
Yes, as long as we can show that they somehow benefit COVID. Or responding to COVID or anything like that. That's absolutely right. Even if you have it in your 2021 CIP, but if it's something that we could somehow tie to our COVID response, then absolutely.
Hi, Betty. It's Angela. How about cell phones? I know a lot of departments do have cell phones that they use but for those departments that don't, and people who are using their personal cell phones and having their phone directed to it, could we do a, certain amount a month that we pay for them for March 1st through December 31st to pay for their cell phones or help reimburse that?
There again, something to look into.
Eddie, I have a couple IT questions. So one is, would it be possible, this is probably more for Pat, to get like a figure that it costs for an entire computer with the software licenses that we would need for new computers, and the same with laptops or Surface Pros? And then my other question would be, okay, is it possible to get, like, I'm thinking of Tableau. I'd love to have that. It would be great to use for our dashboard. It would give us a more robust dashboard. Can we pay for a year of that with this kind of money? Because those things tend to be more of a subscription kind of deal, or a software license. Would that be okay?
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines for several other things, and we'll probably need to fill out a form and send it into the state of Kansas to find out if we can do this. In answer to your earlier question, yes, we will get together a price sheet for the various pieces of equipment that people might want to be ordering in order to support more mobile workers during this whole endeavor. I also want to find out, can we order or pay for services that are sold in annual allotments? For example, we've got a lot of extra use on our telecom system right now, and I need to establish some additional telephone trunks. I can do that month to month, but I can also do it for a year contract that would cost probably less money than it would be to pay it month to month. I think if I put that to the state of Kansas and say, hey, it costs me less to buy 1 to maybe 3 years of this service than to do 6 months of it month to month, is that an allowable expense to go ahead and pay for that for the out years? I suspect they might come back and say that that's allowable. So yeah, a whole lot of things that are going to be coming up in the IT realm, and we're going to work through them in the Sparks Committee and with the state of Kansas. But we'll get the information out to you about laptops and any other gear that you need to work remotely. And then we would encourage anybody to think carefully about workers that may have to go back to a remote location as the situation changes between now and December. I kind of expect or half expect to see some more building closures and things like that. So think through how many people you're going to have out and around and how many of those need laptops to work with or a Surface tablet. Does that get your questions answered, Linda?
Yes, sir, that helps. I'm interested in some of those bigger software purchases that, like a year or so that we could do more with to help with COVID.
Yeah, we're also looking at software licensing for things like Office 365 Teams. I have some concerns about buying those because if we pay for them this year with COVID funds and we can't pay for any additional years, then that inflates my budget in the out years that we would have to cover licensing and maintenance for. So I got to work through that, but I can see situations where it would be extremely valuable to have additional licenses for Teams so that we could all be on the same platform as we're working remotely, but together within Shawnee County.
Another thing that just came to my mind was, I think a lot of times when we started this, we started working from home very quickly. And I think we thought it was going to be a very temporary thing. So probably there's quite a few people that were just using their personal computer from home and using LogMeIn or something like that. As Pat said, this may be a long-term thing. So it may be time to look at actually buying them a laptop or a Surface Pro or something like that for at home, that if this does become a longer term thing, we are equipped to do that. Just a thought that came to mind.
Hey, Betty, with the issue we got coming up on the commissioner's agenda, and obviously it's got to get approved. We have the situation where we are, because of the COVID, we're trying to reduce the number of the inmate traffic through the facility. And we're going to be looking at putting the tablets, of maybe getting more tablets, but also putting the law library on those. So we don't, it's all in response to the COVID stuff. That would be paid out of the inmate stuff. Is that something to look at for being reimbursed for at least through this year?
Yes, I would definitely think so.
Okay.
Now, I think, yeah, maybe one of those things that now we have to look at your rules for paying it out of the inmate account rather than paying it out of your budget, but I don't know why it couldn't be, because it's related. If you're adding it on, it's related to COVID. I don't know why it wouldn't be.
We've already been approved to use the inmate wellness account because it's an inmate program. We have a law library that's up in the gym. So that's been going on for several years. We just want to change it now to where now with the tablets, to put it all on the tablets. So now I don't have to transport any inmate through the facility, which will reduce the spread of the COVID. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Betty, if we incur additional expenses because we're having to hire more intermittent staff to manage the patrons on the deck at our pools, or do additional cleaning in park restrooms and things like that, would that cost be something that paying for intermittent staff, that would be okay to include?
Yes, it just has to be documented, what they are doing and the time that they are doing it, that is devoted. As Nelson said, it has to be significantly, what is the term? Anyway, it has to be significantly related to COVID. But yes, absolutely.
So if we use the Great Overland Station as a place to quarantine people, could I get money to operate that building for a year?
You're going to quarantine people there?
I'm just thinking outside of the box.
I'll give you that, Tim. You can have that responsibility.
All right,
that's
I'll
really outside the box.
No, wait, we want to use Great Overland for selecting jurors, so no. A lot of what the court is doing is, like Brian said, a more robust system for video hearings between the court and the jail. Obviously, we're pretty well set here with our folks being able to work remotely. We do have quite a few people that are using their personal laptops or computers, and we purchased flash top licenses for a good share of those. Obviously, if we ever get to the point of holding jury trials again, that voir dire and selection process will have to be at an offsite location. Every location we've looked at that's feasible size-wise comes with a rental fee, additional cleaning fees. Not to mention, if we're doing multiple selection for multiple juries at a single time, we'll have to have additional hardware, et cetera, printers offsite for those check-in processes to take place. But we do have a few courtrooms that we're using portable equipment, so we could obviously come up with some Zoom technology to assist in those Zoom hearings that we're having on a daily basis.
Lee, on those, I know the courtrooms, we've been upgrading them, the audio visual, as we've been remodeling the courtroom.
Correct.
Is there any way that we could say that, that we could upgrade them earlier without the remodeling the courtroom, but upgrade the AV systems in a lot of those, and say that would help, in the COVID, because of more, testimony that's, remote or something like that?
Absolutely, and it's a simple fact that you know, a vast number of our hearings are taking place via Zoom on a daily basis. All 16 of our divisions are hearing cases via television now and being streamed on YouTube because we have to be able to make those public. So absolutely, we can, and they're pretty much, you know, we can give you, I could probably give you a ballpark off the top of my head for what one courtroom costs to upgrade on the AV side, and we can, you know, multiply that by the number of courtrooms that do not have technology. Not a problem.
Lee, would they be able to do those prior to the end of the year? Get them physically done?
I don't see that as being a problem because so many places, we typically contract with SciTech to do our AV work. And I think a lot of that business is just not happening right now. So they'd probably be tickled pink to be able to come in and update 7 courtrooms. Not to mention how excited our judges would be to get their courtrooms upgraded.
Well, that's kind of the what I was talking about is the future benefits. You know, if we can, and there again, we'll all these, especially large projects, we'll want to make sure of their eligibility before we move ahead. But you know, those things that can really help us in the future and maybe move some of those costs that we were looking at in the future and being paid now under this COVID relief fund money, that's a tremendous benefit to the county.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
Betty, do you have and I don't know if it was mentioned, if it was, I apologize. Do you have the proper form? I mean, forum, how do you want us to submit our request from like the DOC? Is it to be in a memo form to you with this is the outline of what we've reimbursed or what we've spent because it's already in there, and this is what we expect, and we're looking at this? I mean, has there been any discussion on how you want those submitted?
Right now, I think we wait till we see if this consultant is approved, and then we wait and see what they have. So many of these forms and those types of things, they already have established and they already have them set up. So if this is approved on Monday, then I say then we would send out more information from them.
Betty, you had earlier said mid-July as a potential due date, if you will. Is that, do you have an idea, like July 15th, July 20th?
I'm thinking 15th through the 20th, something like that. That I don't know. I mean, you know, that'll be something our Spark committee will have to discuss. That's just kind of my own thought in order to have time to compile them and then make a recommendation, get it on the you know, commission agenda, them to have time to discuss it, have public input. You know, that's just kind of my own thought.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, if there's no other comments or questions, I hope this has given you an opportunity, given you a little information and an opportunity to start thinking about these things. And, you know, I will send out some of the guidance that I have that's just federal guidance. And I'll also send out that form that I talked to you about, the request for guidance interpretation form. It's a fillable form that if you have specific things like some of these we talked about, you can fill them out and send them to Audit Finance. You can do that anytime, and we can go ahead and get those sent up to the state and get an answer on them. One of the things, another thing that this consultant has is if you have one of these situations that you think is kind of a gray area, one of the things about this, so much of the eligibility guidance is very broad. So there's a lot of gray area. And one of the things this consultant has is they have a report that they can help you fill out, or, you know, that you have the expense, the costs, and then on that form you document which parts of the act this falls under, and basically your justification for it. So down the road, you know, if this is audited a year from now by the state, we can go back and say, this is our justification. This is why we took this as an eligible cost. So that's another thing they have that will help us work through these justifications and why we believe it's eligible.
Hey, Betty, do the reimbursement funds, do those go back to the departments to put in our budget?
If it was paid, yes, if it was paid from your department, it will reimburse that expense.
Okay.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, thank you. I hope it gets you thinking. I think we had some good discussion. Linda, you unmuted. Did you have something?
I was just going to say, have a great day.
Oh, well, good. You too. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sky.